Hi, I'm Dave Volrath of the St. Joe Valley Greens. We're here today in the Arboretum and greenhouse of near Potawatomi Park for a press conference by INPIRG, Indiana Public Interest Research Group, and they're going to present the new report that they've done, Troubled Waters, and it's going to address some of the state of water quality in Indiana. I'm pleased to be here today and participate because of our interest, that is the interest of the St. Joe Valley Greens, in a water quality issue that affects us here locally as well as throughout the state. That issue is combined sewer overflows. Over 100 different cities in Indiana have this problem that stems from decisions made decades ago to combine storm sewers with sanitary sewers. The problem is that whenever rain occurs in as small amounts as a half inch, the facilities to treat wastewater are overwhelmed and raw sewage bypasses the treatment facilities and goes directly into our waters. We have problems then with health concerns, especially E. coli and fecal coliform bacteria that can hurt those who have full body contact with the water, especially children. I happen to be sitting on the South Bend Mayor's Commission for the Combined Sewer Overflow Plan for the City of South Bend, and we've been, for the past several months, looking at a variety of different technologies that could be used to address this problem of combined sewer overflows and remediate the problem to bring our water quality into compliance with standards for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management and the federal EPA. At this point, we are still considering what mix of technologies would best solve the problem, and then we have the further important issue to decide how to pay for these technologies. The technologies are expensive, but the St. Joe Valley Greens believe that we must, as communities, step up to the plate and pay what it takes to assure water quality for our future.
When drafting the Clean Water Act in 1972, Congress set clearly stated goals of making all of our waterways fishable and swimmable by 1983 and eliminating pollution discharged into waterways by 1985. More than 30 years later, unfortunately, we're far from realizing those originally stated goals of the Clean Water Act. And in fact, nationally, 39% of our rivers, 51% of our estuaries, and 46% of our lakes are not safe for fishing and swimming. So we're here today to release this report, Troubled Waters, which documents one of the reasons why our waterways remain troubled, and that is polluters violating their pollution permits and illegally discharging pollution into waterways all over the country. We're also here today to hear from these local environmental groups about the amazing work that citizens are doing to protect our waterways here in northern Indiana, about some of the opportunities that volunteers and residents in the area can take on, and calling on our elected officials and the federal government to match the diligence that you'll hear about here from these local groups. In order to write this report, INPIRG submitted a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA request, to the US EPA, and we obtained data on polluters' compliance with Clean Water Act permits between January 2002 and June 2003. So it's an 18-month period. And we looked at major facilities discharging pollution in excess of their Clean Water Act permits. We assessed the types of pollutants that they're discharging into our waterways and determined the amounts by which the facilities are exceeding their permitted pollution levels. The results of our analysis are clear. Facilities in Indiana and across the country are continuing to pollute at levels above the permitted pollution levels. So there's actually more pollution being dumped into our waterways than is allowed by law. In Indiana, some of our specific findings, we found that 64% of the industrial and municipal facilities in Indiana are in violation of their pollution permits. 64%. That ranks Indiana 18th nationally among states for percentage of facilities exceeding their pollution permits. For specific numbers, polluters reported 1,175 exceedances of Clean Water Act permits during the 18-month period that we studied. That puts Indiana 10th nationally among states for the number of violations. And then furthermore, polluters in Indiana reported 112 instances in which they exceeded their Clean Water Act permits by more than 5 times the legal limit. So we're not talking about small amounts of pollution here, but 5 times the legal limit, 112 times in Indiana. Nationally, 60% of facilities violated their pollution permits. And the average facility in violation we found was exceeding its limit by more than 600%, or 6 times the legal limit. That's the national average for how far the facilities were violating their permits. Now we have a list of all the facilities in the state that violated their permits. It's quite a long list, and it's both municipal facilities and industrial facilities. Here in this region, there are a few municipal facilities that violated their permits, so I'll just detail those for you as well. So the Elkhart Municipal Sewage Treatment Plant violated its permit twice for chlorine, which it discharged into the St. Joe River. The Goshen Sewage Treatment Plant violated its permit once for fecal coliform, which it discharged into the Elkhart River. The Ligonier Municipal Sewage Treatment Plant violated its permit actually 11 times for several pollutants, E. coli, fecal coliform, phosphorus, and others. And in fact, it violated its permits by as much as 20,000% in a couple of instances, which is 200 times their legal limit. And that's detailed in the report. And then on the Michigan side of the line, there were a couple relevant violations as well. The Buchanan Wastewater Treatment Plant discharged illegal amounts of chlorine into the St. Joe River. And the Three Rivers Wastewater Treatment Plant violated its permit 20 times, sometimes by as much as 1,000% or 10 times the legal limit for chlorine, fecal coliform, suspended solids, and other things. And all that goes right into the St. Joe River. Now, one thing to point out is that this report is really just the tip of the iceberg. So EPA data only includes major facilities, which means we're excluding hundreds of thousands of minor facilities that are also polluting. And then we're talking about point source pollution, so we're not even addressing agricultural or urban runoff. So really this problem of water pollution is just the tip of the iceberg. But the more important thing to remember is that people fish in these waterways, children swim in the waterways. Reverend Kaufman will talk about how people are baptized in these waterways. They're important for our way of life here. And unfortunately, this number of violations indicates that the federal government is not doing all that they can to make sure our waterways are safe, which is why we're fortunate to have so many local groups here working on this. But we want to see the federal government do better. EPA's proposed budget for fiscal year 2005 is about $606 million below what it is this year, what it is at their operating level right now. So that's a 7% decrease. That means that the federal government is proposing to take environmental cops off the beat. There will be fewer people available to do inspections, smaller ability to actually enforce the law. And the proposed budget also cuts some of the funding for the state's clean water revolving loan funds, which help the municipal facilities improve their operations. That's reduced by about $492 million, about a 36% decrease from this year. And moreover, the federal government has suggested a litany of changes and rollbacks to the Clean Water Act that would actually allow more pollution and hold polluters less accountable. So rather than weakening the Clean Water Act and cutting back on enforcement, INPERC is here to urge our elected officials to strive to meet the goals of the Clean Water Act by fully funding the EPA's enforcement agency and enforcement program so that we can put more environmental cops on the beat, by ending efforts to weaken the Clean Water Act and remove waters from its jurisdiction, by toughening enforcement and implementation of the Act, and by maintaining and expanding the public's right to know so that the public has full access to this kind of information about what pollution is being discharged. So now I want to hand it over to some of the local representatives. Everyone here is going to have the chance to speak briefly, and then we'll take questions at the end. So first, Reverend Doug Kaufman from Benton Mennonite Church to talk about why water quality is essential in the first place.
As Lisa said, I'm Doug Kaufman, and I'm a pastor of Benton Mennonite Church in southwest Elkhart County. And for many years, water pollution is something I have thought about, but it became more tangible to me about 3 years ago. We had a youth and young adult that we were planning to baptize, and since we are across the road from the Elkhart River, we decided we would baptize them in the Elkhart River. And as we were planning the service, one of our members came up to me and told me that the county health department does not recommend full body contact with the waters of the Elkhart River. The E. coli levels are usually too high to be safe for any kind of human contact. So we told the people being baptized about the risk of being baptized in the Elkhart River, and they decided that it was worth the risk. After all, we believe that baptism is risky business anyway. And so we did have a baptismal service on the banks of the Elkhart River. But immediately after the service, we made sure that they showered very completely so that they could wash off the unhealthy water. We usually think of baptism as a ritual of cleansing, and this time we had to wash from the filthy water. This is an important issue for the faith community because we believe that the world does not belong to us. This is a creation. It is something that God has brought into being, and we are a part of that as well. So we do not possess creation. We are its stewards, and stewardship means that we have a responsibility to the Creator, to the rest of creation, to other people in our community. So we want to leave the world a better place than when we came into it, and right now we are failing at that task. So I would call this a moral and spiritual crisis for our nation. Our waters are being fouled, and offenders are not being held accountable for it. People are profiting from despoiling God's creation, leaving a legacy of filth for their neighbors, both human and animal. So we need moral leadership in this nation. When individuals or companies pollute the water, the response needs to be enforcement and penalties, not a nod and a wink. We need moral accountability so that our waters can once again be waters of life rather than waters of disease and even death.
Thank you. Okay, David Dvorak from the St. Joe Valley Greens.
Thank you. The data in this report, Troubled Waters, show that municipal treatment plants are a big part of the water quality problems in Indiana. Combined sewer overflows, or CSOs, occur when rainstorms overwhelm the capacity of old sewer systems, which combine storm with septic sewers. Storm waters will flush the raw waste directly into the rivers, bypassing waste treatment facilities and transforming waterways into dangerous, disgusting open sewers. Parasites, viruses, bacteria pose health risks to the people on, in, and near the river, especially children. The new CSO public notification rule, which was implemented last month, February, requires cities to identify locations of CSO outlets and nearby bridges, boat launches, parks, schoolyards, public walkways, and downstream drinking water intakes, and to notify the public in each of these affected areas. Over 100 Indiana cities have these antiquated combined sewer systems, which are a legacy of public works decisions made long ago, before decades of residential and commercial development overwhelmed our infrastructures. Each city now must renovate its system to meet 21st century demands and standards. Retention systems can be built to hold untreated waste during rainstorms. Waste treatment facilities can be expanded to handle more volume. Old combined sewer systems can be separated. These improvements will be very expensive, but they are absolutely essential to cope with the accumulated impact of decades of growth. We must also find fairer ways of funding these improvements, such as more progressive structures for water rates, so that small residential users no longer subsidize water and sewer service for large commercial and industrial firms. The data in troubled waters show that the St. Joseph River is in relatively good shape. In the 18 months covered by this study, there were no violations in South Bend, 1 in Mishawaka, and 2 in Elkhart. As the federal support for quality waters appears to waver, the St. Joe Valley Greens urge local governments and residents to redouble our efforts to improve our water quality and thus our quality of life. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sherry Bowman is from Elkhart EnviroCorps, which is a volunteer program dedicated to maintaining the health of our waterways.
Elkhart EnviroCorps is an AmeriCorps National Service Program hosted by the City of Elkhart and has been serving the Elkhart community since 1994. EnviroCorps' mission is to 1, to create a better Elkhart through a commitment to the environment, to service, and to education. 2, to inspire the spirit of service in the Elkhart community. 3, to empower the community to improve their environment by working together to get things done. And 4, to encourage responsibility and the individual growth of members through community service. Elkhart relies solely upon groundwater as its water source and is registered as a groundwater guardian community. EnviroCorps promotes clean water through education, conservation, and community outreach programs. These include resource appreciation activities, such as free interpretive canoe trips on the Elkhart River and youth summer camps, educational opportunities through the public schools, as well as through Saturday seminars at the Elkhart Environmental Center, restoration efforts such as river cleanups and river monitoring by promoting and participating in the Indiana Adopt a River program and the Hoosier River Watch Monitoring program. In the last 9 years, river cleanups on the St. Joseph and Elkhart rivers have removed 134 tons, or over 269,000 pounds of trash. Elkhart operates on a combined storm and sanitary sewer system, as does other Michiana municipalities. In order to reduce the overflows, there exists a city ordinance that fines owners of connected downspouts $2,500 per day as incentive to reroute downspout stormwater on property green space. EnviroCorps assists in these efforts by offering free stormwater downspout disconnection to homeowners within the city limits. To date, 736 downspouts have been disconnected. Each disconnected downspout spares 400 gallons of water entering the sewer system. EnviroCorps also believes in conserving water. Therefore, we also offer in-home water conservation devices to homeowners within the city limits at no cost. These low-flow shower heads, aerators, and toilet tank displacement devices not only conserve clean water, but simultaneously reduce wastewaters and monthly water bills. These conservation devices cut water usage by up to 40%. To date, 453 water conservation devices have been installed.
Great. And then last but not least, we'll turn it over here to Bob Cervelli, who is from Michiana Watershed Incorporated, to talk specifically about the work that his group is doing and has been doing for quite some time.
The general mission of Michiana Watershed Incorporated is to encourage groups and agencies in the watershed to engage in projects which result in the improvement and conservation of the environment and natural resources in the Michiana community. Currently, we're promoting the conversion of rails to trails and development of bike pedestrian trails in the watershed, expansion of green space along the St. Joe River, monitoring of the quality of the water in the river and its tributaries, and promoting the restoration and preservation of these streams. Now, I'd like to highlight 3 of our activities. I'd just like to say a couple of words about the trails. There's a map there which shows the trail systems on both banks of the St. Joe River, which connects various green spaces, etc. And we're looking for people to help us with these endeavors. And so we're looking for members, new members that might be interested in helping us promote and develop these trail systems. Secondly, we'll take a look at the St. Joe River as a recreational opportunity. As you know, there's going to be Olympic trials for whitewater kayak teams in the East Race this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, April 2nd to the 4th. Also on June 27th, Michiana Watershed is organizing and conducting the annual Paddle Fest. These are canoe races in the St. Joe River, and we've been doing this for some 35 years. With respect to the water sampling, we're working with Hoosier River Watch. We have some trained people that have taken the course, and the background on this is we have 500 streams in Indiana. 400 of them are classified as impaired. That means they exceed specified limits on things such as mercury, atrazine, E. coli, etc. And in order to monitor all these 500 streams, we have a little manpower problem there if we want to monitor each and every one of them, if we're going to use professional help. So what the DNR has done is to organize the River Watch program. 3,000 amateur volunteer samplers have been trained since 1996. Now a person goes out and does the sampling, and he takes these 9 measurements, and then the information is emailed to the database in Indianapolis. This database provides a first order scan of the pollution problems, and then later, as you've got this scan over the entire state, and it kind of highlights where the hot spots are, and then they'll send some professional samplers out to pinpoint the problem more accurately. And then next, of course, comes the enforcement phase, whenever there's exceedance going on. So then our job is to encourage the local authorities to take measurements, or to take measures to mitigate the problem. And we're trying to set up a test kit station in St. Pat's Park where new volunteers can go on in the spare time and sign out the equipment, go out to their testing, and then return to St. Pat's Park. So in all these endeavors here that I mentioned, we need some help. We need more members, more volunteers, and then also we need financial help. Some of these test kits they're not free, and the state can only supply so many of them. So we're out trying to raise some money to see if we can help with that situation.
So then just to recap, this report, Troubled Waters, documents the critical state of our waterways, that more than 64% of facilities in Indiana were found to be in violation of their pollution permits. And again, all of these local groups are here to demonstrate the diligence and the activity that's happening on the ground here in St. Joe County to protect our waterways. And we hope that this report can call to attention the fact that the federal government and our state and local officials can do better to help us protect the waters and help us hit those goals of the Clean Water Act as stated in 1972. Any questions? Yeah.
Once your environmental organizations have found these violations of the law, what do you do? Can you just raise awareness, or what is that?
Well, we are calling on the EPA to actually implement and enforce the law better. So we know that nationally 60% of facilities violated their permit at least once. And the EPA doesn't have a record of who they fined and who paid the fines and kind of where we went from there. So, we want to put it back to the EPA and say that we should have this number of violations be 0, and we're calling on the EPA to do better. But then I think the Hoosier River Watch program and the Elkhart EnviroCorps program and some of the other local efforts here are great ways that people can get involved to be protecting the water and to hold some of these industrial and municipal facilities accountable.
Were most of the municipal places where there are some businesses?
There's also some businesses. So in this area, it was all municipal violations. But for example, AET Packaging down in Terre Haute actually had a number of violations. NIPSCO and U.S. Steel and other kinds of big industries also had a number of violations as well, and that's all documented in the report. And it's also documented into which water bodies they discharged and what pollutant they were discharging. Because our waterways are so important for drinking and fishing and swimming, that it's always better to protect them and let them be constantly degraded.
If I could add to that, I think it's really unfortunate when people think that we have a choice of the economy or the environment, and that's really a false choice. This morning's Tribune had an article about the East Race, which is a phenomenal draw in terms of tourism. Tourism is a big source of economic stimulus for this area. And so I think that it's in all of our interests to build the quality of the waters because it has to do with decisions that companies might make to locate here based on the quality of the life that their employees might look forward to. It has lots of economic implications. So being kind and responsible with respect to the environment is good economic development policy.
So the federal government has the same responsibility to hold municipal and industrial facilities accountable. But that said, yeah, I mean, certainly contacting local elected officials and letting them know that having our municipal facilities be in violation is unacceptable to the community would certainly help them to move forward. But then, of course, it's a matter of funding and it's a matter of priorities. So it's important that I think that the local officials are thinking about that and moving forward.
The St. Joe Valley Greens welcome your input or ideas on this issue of water quality, and especially combined sewer overflow remediation plans. And we would like you to visit our website at www.sjvgreens.org and let us know what you think about this issue.
It's not easy being green, having to spend each day in the color of the leaves, when it could be nicer being red, yellow or gold, something much more colorful like that. It's not easy being green. You see the blending with so many ordinary everyday things. People tend to pass you by because you're not standing in like sparkles in the water, stars in the sky. Big like an ocean,